sort of. All right. I think we're well set up here. So we'll just get started because it's going to be an insight-packed, action-packed panel. Lots of interesting insights. So pay attention. We've also got some interactive elements for all of you listening in, so it won't be one of those boring chessboard Zoom panels where you start to drone off. So we'll keep you on your toes, and hopefully you'll keep us on our toes. Ask us pointed, hard questions that make us think. So I'm excited for this. Very well. Let's get started here. So I'll do a quick introduction to all the panelists. They're all stellar individuals. I'm sure you already read about them in their in the event description. Nonetheless, I think I'd still like to make a brief introduction here. So I'll just go by order that they're present on my screen. So we have Alexa Hagerty, who is an anthropologist and scholar of science, technology, and society STS studies, who's investigating the societal impacts of AI and ML systems using ethnographic, arts-based, and participatory methods. So something super close to me, so very excited to hear more about that. She's based at the University of Cambridge, the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence and Center for the Study of Existential Risk, both of two places that produce outstanding work. And her research focuses on affected communities, equity, and human rights. She's also a member of the Just AI Network at the Ada Lovelace Institute and a fellow of the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Systematic Inequalities and Social Cohesion. So welcome, Alexa. Great to have you with us. Next up on my chessboard, on my Zoom chessboard, is Stella. Stella is an industry researcher who devotes her free time to language modeling and alignment research. Lots of questions on language modeling. There's so much happening in the space right now. She leverages her background in logic and theoretical computer science to develop models of reasoning and decision-making and methodologies for formal verification of AI technologies and research in strategic decision-making. She's also a student in the College of Computing at Georgia Tech, where she's pursuing a Master's of Science in Computer Science and is an organizer of the AI Village, which I am also a member of. Such a stellar community. If you guys haven't heard of it, I'm sure Stella is going to talk more about it and share some links to that as well. It's a community of hackers and data scientists working to educate the world on the use and, more importantly, or perhaps something that deserves a lot more attention, the abuse of AI in security and privacy. Next up on my screen is Soraj, who is joining us from Bangkok in Thailand. He's a professor of philosophy and the director of the Center for Science, Technology, and Society at the Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, Thailand. His work focuses on bioethics, computer ethics, and the roles that science and technology play in the culture of developing countries. So that's going to be very exciting because typically a lot of these conversations are centered around Western Europe and North America. So it'll be great to see and hear from some Asian perspectives as well. His concern is mainly on how science and technology can be integrated into the life world of the people in the so-called third world countries and what kind of ethical considerations can be obtained from such relations. He is the author of The Ethics of AI and Robotics, a Buddhist viewpoint. I know Connor from my team probably has some questions for him as well. He's also written The Online Self and a Buddhist Theory of Privacy. And finally, a dear friend, Connor, who works at Aleph Alpha, where he researches empirical normative learning inspired by alignment by default, steered optimizes model splintering and related work with a focus on near future model-based RL systems, and hopes to make progress both on practical techniques for understanding and eliciting useful behavior from current models and better conceptualizations of what the actual philosophical question is that we're trying to solve and how to approach it. That's a fantastic and very worthy initiative, because I think sometimes we get caught up and dragged away in some of the abstract. So great to have someone with practical experience there. So that's, by the way, of introductions. I am Abhishek Gupta, the founder and principal researcher at the Montreal Ethics Institute. I also work as an ML engineer at Microsoft. So I am delighted to be hosting the panel today. With me, I'm joined by Mo from my team and Connor from my team as well, who will be assisting me throughout the session. So if you have any questions, I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well, but you can also message them if you have any questions. That's for the participants. Fantastic, guys. We also have a as I start to get into the panel and ask questions, just to get a sense from all of you who are listening and who are participating from around the world, we have a little Slido poll going for you, and my colleague Connor will shortly share the detail for that. And a question there just to sort of get the juices flowing for us is, what do you think is the most important consideration for AI ethics today? And that's for the participants. So we'll get a dynamic word cloud as all of you get a chance to chime in there. Yeah, I guess without further ado, I'll jump into the questions here. And so it's been an interesting year, I would say. If we look at the past about 7 to 8 months, we're halfway through 2021 here. A lot has happened in the field of AI ethics. Firing of Dr. Timnit Gebru, Dr. Margaret Mitchell from Google, still very much on all of our minds, I think. We've had a bit more time to reflect on this since that took place. And, I guess I'd like to pose this question to all of you. What issues do you think in the field of AI ethics did this incident expose? And anyone, who feels comfortable wants to kickstart that discussion.
Well, if no one else will, I guess I'll give my 2 cents to the situation. I guess for me, I thought the entire situation was kind of quite interesting because I was not as surprised. I guess I was surprised it took this long. In a sense, it always felt kind of strange to me to put the ethical application of technology into the hands of people that profit from the use of this technology. This, as we've seen this in the past very commonly with oil corporations or tobacco corporations, funding research that seems to address societal problems, but in a way is kind of sometimes used for whitewashing purposes. So if anything, this is an endorsement, I feel, of their work, that it actually was uncovering actual issues that might be worth looking into. There's a good saying that I like to apply to the situation, which basically says, never trust someone to understand something when their salary depends on them not understanding it. So I feel like this applies in the situation as well.
That's a great comment, and I would love to build on that because I had similar reaction, but then it also makes me think, so where is the space for us to really be doing this work? Because I think that often people look to academia as if that's a kind of outside space that will allow this kind of rigorous study of AI ethics, which to some degree I think it can, but I think that we can't understand academia as outside either, that there are many funding structures that also are involved in academia. And then also there's incentive structures in academia that are also not so great. For example, that if people are measured for their tenure review on peer-reviewed publications and not on sort of wider community engagement, then that's not necessarily so useful for AI ethics. Or like in my field, applied work is sort of frowned upon to some degree in the academy. So where is the space for us to do this work?
I completely agree with both what Alexa and Connor said. I believe a week before Timnit was fired, I wrote a tweet that was basically what Connor had just said, which was corporate AI ethics research is best compared to climate research done by oil companies in the 80s or medical research done by tobacco companies in the 60s. It exists for the primary purpose of making the company look good. And I think that's still true to a very large extent because of the profit motivations. And I don't have a great understanding of Google's internal structure, but from what I understand, one of the problems that, independent of their recent reorganization and stuff, like prior to that, one of the problems that some of the AI ethics researchers run into is that upstream from them, like their boss or their boss's bosses, were people whose job was to develop new capacities. And those people weren't always thrilled with the papers that they were writing. I also know, I don't know exactly how much of this has been shared publicly, so I want to be a little careful about what I say. but I also know somebody at who's high up at Google who has told me that when they've submitted papers for internal review, they've gotten feedback that they need to reword it to promote Google products in a more positive light, like explicitly. Yeah, I don't think I want to say more on that because I'm not actually sure how much of this has been shared publicly. But I know multiple researchers who have said, like, no, we've submitted things for internal review, and it's like, yeah, we basically got told that it made Google look too bad, and so we need to change how we are writing these papers. And I think that's really bad. And especially with regards to like the distinction between tech and like the tech industry and academia, from, you know, it's really strange to say this, but from a AI research point of view, academia is like broke, completely broke, has no money at all. Even like minor tech companies have much more resources at their disposal than most academics could ever dream of. So Connor and I are part of a research collective called EleutherAI that does open source machine learning research, and we basically get GPU donations from like cloud companies and stuff who want to support our work. And so, for example, one of them is called CoreWeave. They are one of our major sponsors. They are a pretty small cloud company, all things considered. And they've given us 56 A100s to use. And the fact that they can afford to do that is just completely insane. I talked to academic researchers, and they're, you know, I talked to academic researchers who come to me and they're like, you know, would you guys be interested in collaborating on this with us? I'm like, well, what are you working with? Okay, well, what could you do if I was to give you, say, 6 A100s, and they start salivating? Like, nobody at their lab has the ability to access 6 A100s, and like CoreWeave can afford to give us like 50 something of them just because they like the work we're doing. You know, and when you look at a company like Google, who has like orders of magnitude more money than CoreWeave, it's just insane. I think to a very large extent, you can't view academic research as independent of industry incentives, if only because academics can't afford to do cutting edge research without industry. And one of a really good example of this kind of previous stuff we'll talk about later is with like GTP3. You know, you have to pay OpenAI to use this. You have to pay OpenAI a decent amount of money to use this, and OpenAI doesn't even let everyone pay them to use it. You have to get approved. And so they have a very strong ability to shape how people do research with large language models simply by choosing who they approve, and also by virtue of the fact that a lot of academics cannot afford their sticker prices. And, you know, I know some people who have discounts, some labs that have discounts, and who they choose to give that kind of stuff to is a very big driver of who actually gets to do research. And this is doubly true when we're talking about applications and downstream stuff where you want to take a pre-trained transformer and use it to do something. You know, OpenAI gets to choose which labs and which groups have the ability to train those downstream models.
Yes, I agree with the panelists. And what I'm thinking, I'm not, obviously I'm not with Google, and I don't know what they are thinking, and I don't know their internal operations. So I'm looking at the situation from far away, and it seems to me ironic. At first, in the first place, they appointed this ethics board. You know, it's a way from the outside looking in, it seems to be a way for these companies to show themselves to the world that, you know, they are ethical and they care about the ethical issues that we are talking about at this panel and others. But it seems that the members of this ethics board, they have to toe the line, so to speak. They have to follow the party line, and if they continue to do that, you know, I would think that they would be able to continue working or remaining as member of the board for a foreseeable time. But there's no point of having such an ethics board if only what they do is to toe the party line. So they have to be critical. All academics are, and it backfired. So it's an ironic situation for them. I think it's better for them to, follow what we are recommending and not to have such a situation, which kind of ironic in my view.
Right. No, and that's fair. And I think, some folks have already also, started to chime in about exactly that, the Streisand effect in terms of, the suppression of that leading to actually more publicity and more scrutiny of the exact thing that they were trying to avoid. One of the points that I think both, Stella and Alexa brought up that I'd like to dig deeper into is, we're talking about these spaces where we can have these sorts of discussions in a manner where we are not constrained by, perhaps, the people who employ us, or research funding, or have those constraints in place. And I know, at least from conversations as a part of the AI Village, Stella has time and again brought up this issue that it's very important for us to address it and create these spaces where we can have these discussions that are not just talking about these issues in the abstract, but again, trying to find practical solutions. So I'm wondering if any of you, of course, Stella included as well, if you would want to kickstart us on how you think we can create that, to use Alexa's words, that outside space, right? How do we create a space that is, let's say maybe outside space is asking for too much, maybe a better way to have some of these discussions that are constrained today in terms of, who is funding your research, or, whether have access to particular resources, or, other incentives like trying to obtain tenure, or those sorts of constraints.
I really want to have this discussion, and I don't want to take us off track too much, but I do want to say that I really don't think there is an outside, and that one thing that's been made really clear from everything that has happened at Google is that AI ethics and AI development in academia, and we're all caught in these structures of anti-Black racism, these structures, these political economies, we all share these. So, and we can see that's, everything that's happened just in the months since then, the erasure of Black women's work on 60 Minutes, the ways in which tenure hasn't been granted to Black women. So I think that this is just something that we can't separate out from all of these deeper issues in our societies. But I don't want to suggest that there may not be spaces that we can carve out, but I really appreciated, for example, the Abuse and Misogyny playbook in the January Montreal AI ethics report that really brought our attention to the ways in which this is all stitched together, and if there's not going to be an easy out.
Yeah, and kind of building on that, one thing I think that's really important to keep in mind is that it's not just about, it is about funding research, but it's also about like control over what is released and what is a research project. Funders and even just researchers in general have control over what they choose to release and what they choose to not release. And something that I believe very passionately is that the decision to take, you're training an AI model and you say, okay, this is good enough to use, or this is good enough to publish. That decision is not something that's not something objective. It's not something, it's based in statistics, but how you chose those statistics can vary wildly depending on the person. It's a very culturally influenced and political decision. And how one responds to models that are later revealed to not be up to various standards is also an example of this. I think the I feel bad bringing this example up because I feel like we're just hating on Google, and this isn't a particularly Google problem. This is like a general problem. My company has this problem. Every company has this problem. But my go-to example of this is in 2015, there was this uproar because a Google application was having trouble identifying Black men. It was for tagging people in photos, and it couldn't identify Black men. And some people did some experiments, and they realized that the reason for this was it thought Black men were gorillas rather than humans. And Google did this big mea culpa, and they pulled the product from production. And like a year and a half later, they released it, and they said the problem was fixed. Well, a couple years after that, The Verge did an investigative report on this. And what they found was that the way that the problem was fixed is that they made it so that the algorithm was not able to identify gorillas. Like, they removed gorillas from the ontology. And that happened to mean that Black men were identified as humans again, because that was like the second best classification after gorillas. Now, what exactly is going wrong? Like, where you should locate the problem with what was happening with this photo tagger is an interesting question of itself. But I think regardless of what you think the core problem is, removing gorillas from the ontology is not a solution. Even if it happens to correct the particular example that has been noticed, it definitely doesn't correct whatever the underlying problem is. And somebody took the original algorithm and evaluated it and said, yes, this is good to release, without noticing that it tended to think that Black men were gorillas instead of people. And someone else probably was looking at various possible fixes and selected, let's just ban gorillas as a fix, and decided that that made it now acceptable to release. And there's a lot of decisions that are being made here that often are given the veneer of objectivity or the veneer of being data-driven because there are statistics and numbers associated with them. But there's a quote from some statistics textbook I read in college. Give me a position in data and I'll find a statistic that tells you what you want. Like, how you make those decisions and how you come to those decisions is extremely important and extremely worth being critiqued. And that's another way that especially these larger companies that have more resources and produce more products in general have influence over these conversations in ways that we don't even notice in most of our conversations. Someone in chat just said that, sent me a message saying that they think it was all Black people were identified as gorillas. I don't know if I got the details there exactly right. It could be Black men, it could be all Black people. Thank you for the correction, though I don't think that particularly changes the conclusions.
Yes, to me, it seems like the issue is like on academic freedom. And as a philosopher, I don't need much funding to begin with. So, there is not much of a problem for us who are working in the humanities, at least. There is some funding which is required, but it's not like what the scientists need. So in a way, we are not controlled as much as perhaps people in other fields are when it comes to funding. We need a library, and we can think freely. And the university, because most philosophers work in a university, in the academia, should be a safe place where free thinking, critical thought can operate without restriction. The only restriction, of course, is laid down by the law. We are talking about something that is very, very serious, which all of us know that we must not exceed on those bounds. But within those, we should, ideally speaking, we should have the freedom to speak our own minds, to think whatever is needed in order to solve our problems. And what I'm thinking and I'm concerned with is that the influence from outside the academia, which could be the industry, which could be the political authorities, could encroach upon the academia, and that would be kind of scary, because there could be some connection between the administration of the academia and the industry, and you know, that could be a way to limit academic freedom and critical thinking. Has not happened concretely in my country, that obviously, but it could happen. So when we talk about funding and academic freedom, there is a lot of cause for concern. And I think even the you know, big companies such as Google, Facebook, and so on, is in their ultimate interest to listen to what ethicists have to say and to listen to the people, because after all, they have to work with everybody. They cannot just detach themselves and, you know, remain aloof from everything.
I think for me personally, what intimidates me the most about these kinds of problems, and why I think it's not clear that there is a clear solution to these kind of problems, is that in many ways it is kind of a societal-wide prisoner's dilemma in many sense. It's that when a company develops new technology and they know the others are racing to develop the same technology, you're in a kind of prisoner's dilemma situation. It would be better if everyone would cooperate and maybe not release and have ethicists take a look at it and, you know, understand what, you know, slowly roll it out, understand how the technology might affect the wide world, but someone could defect instead and get a large share of market share and make a lot of money. And the unfortunate truth is that the corporations aren't immoral, they're amoral. They have no morals. Their purpose is to maximize profit. That's what they're designed to do. They're entities designed to maximize profit. And so we can't rely on a, you know, unregulated, you know, just a normal concept of a corporation to act in a cooperative fashion when it comes into its prisoner's dilemmas type situations like this. So that's, for me, that's a very big question. It's like, how do you resolve these like really complicated, these really tricky game theoretic scenarios to even get, even if we knew how to solve these problems, how would we even get people to cooperate on them and not have someone defect?
Right. And that's a great point, right? I think, and Connor, given the work that you do, you know, that touches upon the notions of alignment, do you see a lot of people taking that view or that approach to solving some of these issues that, in fact, Stella, Alexis, Soraj have all brought up in different forms, in terms of, you know, perhaps this misalignment, sometimes even misunderstanding of what is at the core of the issues in the first place, and perhaps maybe even, you know, complicating it a little bit further, the notions of accountability, right? When we're talking about this, I think it's easy to blame an organization, right? Saying that, hey, it's the organization that's doing wrong. But I think Stella quite elegantly put it that someone made a choice saying, hey, this is good enough to go forward, right? So I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I have many thoughts on that, most of them rather cynical. It seems to me is that like the more I study like game theory and the more I study economics, like how decisions are actually made in these large corporations, in many ways, these corporations, these bureaucracies, both in corporate sector and in government sector, are generally designed with the optimization for profit, but also for longevity. You have kind of like this evolutionary pressure that an organization that optimizes for its own survivability is probably going to hang out longer. And a big part of doing that is a big part of having, like, who doesn't know the feeling of, you know, having to do with some government agent or something, and you need something, you know, they need them to fill out a form or something. They said, oh, I can't do that, I have to ask my boss. Well, it's no use for you to scream at them because that's not going to change anything. Because, you know, so in a way you're diffusing responsibility in a way that the system as a whole can resist your attacks against its, of getting something from it that you might want. And like this is exactly what PR departments and stuff are designed to do. They're designed to deflect responsibility and diffuse responsibility in such a way that there's no exact way to hold someone responsible. Stella says very correctly that there is someone made a decision somewhere, but we can never find the one person, because every single person can reliably claim, oh, no, it wasn't me. It was this committee. It was these people. It wasn't me personally. So no individual is responsible. And because no individual is responsible, it's really hard to get to like know how to deal with these like situations, who is at fault if something goes wrong. And if you know, I'm not going to be punished if something goes wrong. If it detects guerrillas or something, okay, the PR department is going to get a lot of trouble, but I personally will not have to suffer because of it. You get these perverse incentives that are so common throughout our society. And I find this an extremely challenging problem, how to address this.
Right. Well, that's a great point, right? And I think perhaps there's something to be learned from the social sciences, perhaps who have something to contribute, because I think these problems are manifesting again in perhaps new settings, but the challenges I feel are perhaps things that have we've faced as a society for many years as a part of all of our institutions, as to say. And Alexa, just sort of, I think, sort of directing this towards you, given the work that you do in participatory research methods, you talk about shifting power to communities. So sort of, taking and building on what Connor just said, do you feel that could be a way to assess and mitigate algorithmic harms? Do you think that these can help to maintain some degree of human agency and oversight once we've developed and deployed these systems, and perhaps extricate ourselves from this diffusion of responsibility, as Connor was mentioning?
Yeah, I do think so. Someone just posted a great paper in the chat about the limits of participatory methods. So I'm not saying here that this is a panacea or that this is going to solve all our problems, but I think it's a powerful tool that used well can help us. And I think it can help us in several ways. I think the one way it can help us is that it can help us think about algorithmic impacts. It can help us think about what actually happens in the world. And that is, there's also a really great thread in this chat talking about, okay, but this is, what this can all remain at this very theoretical, abstract level. So I think actually grounding this in how communities are affected is a way to have a much more concrete understanding of these systems. So that I think is really important. But I also think that there are things we need to think about. So I feel like we're often in this as a nest of ethicists, that we're in this very reactive position where, like, in my work, I feel like, okay, so here's facial recognition technology. We're seeing it used. It's being now sold through private companies. It's in doorbells. It's being used by the police. Oh, here comes emotion recognition. We have to think about this. So it's this kind of constant, oh, here's gait, oh, here's heartbeat recognition, so it just is this kind of constant reaction to technological developments. And I think that if we are always in this reactive stance, we will get exhausted and burnt out, and we're not really going to make very much progress toward building the kind of world that we want to build. So one thing that I worry about with participatory methods is that they just kind of get built into this sort of reactive sort of ethics, where we just sort of check in with communities and say, oh, how did that land? What damage did that do? And that's, I don't think that will be limited in its utility. But I think that what we do have the possibility to do is maybe open up this timeline and really think about how can communities and affected groups be involved in actually problem framing. So what kinds of problems do we have in society or in our communities that we want to solve? Which of these are actually, might AI or ML be a useful tool, because it's not a useful tool for everything, and then where we don't want it at all. So, and then also So I think that this is a real problem, like that we're talking about the developing these technologies in profit-driven systems. It's so like everything starts to look like a nail to this hammer. So how can we use this technology here, in a way that might be profitable? But that's not, that's not really ultimately a way to deal with technologies that are this powerful and have the levels of societal impact that these technologies have. We have to have a much more democratic way of dealing with it, to think about how do we want to utilize them, when do we not want to utilize them, what kinds of problems should they be applied to, and what kinds of problems should they not be applied to. So I think having communities in at that stage of the AI life cycle, where we're actually just kind of imagining how we want to use these tools, that to me seems like it has potential and can be something that would be exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid that this is gonna, I think that's a really great perspective. And I'm afraid that what I'm about to say is gonna come across as a joke, but I mean this 100%. My general heuristic for that is that if you're doing something that is the primary activity of the villain of a film or book or movie, you shouldn't be doing that. And that sounds kind of obvious, like who doesn't think that way? It turns out the answer is a lot of people. I actually first came up with this heuristic when I was reading an in-depth article on predictive policing that the Tampa Bay Chronicle did. They did some very good investigative reporting into how predictive policing was being used in Tampa. And they came across some meeting notes or something like that from when it was first being pitched within the police department. And the guy pitching the product said it's basically an AI version. It's basically an AI version of the Minority Report. And I read that and I went, are you not aware that the cops are the bad guys in that movie? Like seriously, like the cops are the bad guys in that movie. If I tell you like this is basically the same thing as what the bad guys are doing in a popular piece of fiction, your response should not be, oh, that sounds amazing. And the more I've thought about this, like the more regularly I see it fail blatantly. And so, I mean, personally, that is my general heuristic. Like, is there a popular piece of media in which what I am doing or what I'm thinking about doing is the main activity of the bad guys? If so, maybe I shouldn't be doing it.
I absolutely love that, Stella. I think that's so succinct in how, to not do the wrong thing, right? And of course that is so value laden and there's so many facets to it. But I think at least as a heuristic, as a starting point, it's so apt and it's kind of compressed in something that is easy to keep in our heads, right? It's not something that's super complicated. It's like, do I remember this bad movie where the bad guys did this? Okay, maybe I should do it. So I really like that as an actionable heuristic. I think both Alex and Stella, you brought up these notions of what not to do, and I feel that having that degree of deliberation and purpose in how we approach this seems to me quite evocative of some of the ideas in Buddhist philosophies. And I'd love to hear Soraj talk a little bit more about his experience operating and thinking about these ideas, and if you think that there are notions from Buddhist philosophies that we can borrow as we build these AI systems. You wrote as a part of your contribution to the State of AI Ethics reports that trust is going to be a key component, that trust is the component that makes the lifeblood viable, and trust so perhaps if you could expand on that, would love to hear what you have to say on that.
Yes, starting first with Buddhism. I was thinking about how to contribute to the discussion on AI ethics, and perhaps some Buddhist ideas might help. And there is the idea of compassion, which is a key concept in the teaching. Compassion means two things in Buddhism. The first thing is there is the desire and the commitment to help relieve everybody from suffering is the desire and action. And the second aspect of compassion is more cognitive one, is the understanding that everything is interdependent or interrelated. The two aspects are very much connected with each other. You cannot have one without the other. And my question for the past few years is how to apply these two aspects of compassion to more practical concerns that we are grappling with, like AI ethics. And the idea is that, I don't think that corporations, because, the focus is on the corporations, I don't think that corporations can remain detached from society in such a way that, they can install an ethics board to present themselves as being ethical, but in the end they end up firing those boards. I don't think that that is the way to go. The idea that I'm thinking about, exemplified in compassion, would point to the direction where those corporations remain, or those corporations should be more involved in the affairs of society. And the profit motive, while important, is only one factor among many, because if we talk about sustainability and longevity and ethical considerations, those are important as any other in maintaining the health and the well-being of us all, and which is, the whole idea of compassion from the beginning, which is, the relief of suffering. So that is the basic idea of what I've been getting at for the past few years. And coming to the issue of trust and privacy, as we all know, data is very, very important for machine learning, for AI analysis. And there are some countries that take a lot of liberty in gathering the data from their population. Not only corporations, but governments are also doing all this, and it creates a gap between of power between those who has the power to collect the data and those whose data are being collected. Remain in the situation where the gap continues to widen. So the issue of trust comes in when there is a clear regulation, clear ethical ideals where we have a clear rules of data governance and ethical or rules of regulation which everybody agree on, which creates the kind of trust. So it does not mean that we stop providing the data to the AI algorithm, because there can be some good ways, good contributions that AI can do to society also. But the question is, how can the data be provided in such a way that everything in the end everybody benefits? So basically that's what I'm thinking at the moment. So I would be glad to learn from others also.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Soraj. I think that's so relevant, especially as we're thinking about so many different sort of morals and philosophies, and I guess, whose morals and whose philosophies, as we start to think about, incorporating data into these models, it starts to become an important question. And, being more deliberate, being more uh, careful in how we go about doing that, I think becomes quite important. Uh, which sort of brings me to our next question quite naturally, I would say. Uh, and that relates to the work that Connor and Stella have been doing as a part of their research collective. And uh, I'd like to ask, when we're thinking about these large scale language models, uh, you know, we're talking about whose morals might be, sort of incorporated, especially when we're talking about an, I guess if I may call it an internet scale model, given the amount of data that it sort of sucks up. So perhaps maybe, if you could give the participants and all of us really uh, a little bit of context into GPT Neo, which is the model that your research collective has built, how that's similar or perhaps different from GPT-3, and as an extra bonus question, what are your thoughts on Lambda that was just sort of announced at Google's I/O conference? And I'm sorry for everybody that's listening, and it seems that we just keep talking again and again about Google. Also, I'll throw it out, if you have other language models, please ask about them. And before I turn it over to Connor and Stella, there's a very, very exciting also conversation happening in chat. I unfortunately haven't been paying too much attention to it because there's so much great there's so many great insights coming from the panelists itself, from themselves. So please feel free to participate in that as well. There's also the Slido polls that are live. And if you have Q&As that you'd like for me to bring up to the panelists, please do put that in the Slido Q&A section. But over to you, Connor and Stella.
So I'll claim the how did we train our model, and let Connor step on the ethical landmine question of whose models should we be aligned to, or whose ethics, I mean, should our models be aligned to. And I mean, this was the question of what biases you should choose to encode in your algorithms and stuff was something that we considered a lot when training these models. We actually wrote a paper about our data set, which I just linked to in the chat. And about a third of that paper is what we called documenting our data set. So our primary goal was to build a language model that had better knowledge of the things in the world. So we included archive and GitHub and Stack Exchange and like medical information repositories, because we wanted to see if adding this additional factual information would allow it to answer technical questions and in general have a better understanding of what is in the world than other models that were primarily trained on internet text, which have a, let's say, lower technical information content than like academic papers do. But at the same time, we were very aware that, exactly how you choose what data goes into your model is extremely influential on what kinds of biases you encode in various ways. And I mean, I'm not going to pretend we have a good answer to that question. We don't have a good answer to that question. The approach that we took was we ruled out anything that seemed too bad, which was a couple of things that we noted in the appendix. And then what we wanted to focus on was documenting the data sets and identifying what potential problems would be. And I think that one of the reasons we did this, and I think this is kind of a pitfall that a lot of people fall into, is that there is no single correct answer to the question, what kinds of data is appropriate to train a language model on? When we talk about these large language models like GPT-3, like Megatron, we pretend that there is some kind of universal context that these models are going to be applied to. And that's just not true. So these models are typically originally developed with an academic mindset. They are developed for the purpose of doing research. And then they are repurposed and billed as products. And those are not, first of all, those are not the same context. And second of all, two different products are not the same context. if you are using a language model to do something like Alexa or the Google Assistant, you have a different set of priorities and a different set of and a different bar for what is appropriate than if you are doing a text-to-speech algorithm that is reading text and pronouncing it as words. Depending on your context, using curse words may or may not be appropriate. Depending on your context, your cultural context, different words may be interpreted as insults or as slurs when they're not in other contexts. And I know that we like universal solutions, and I know that we like to say that we're all working on the same problem, but we're not. And I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind when working with language models is that there are many, many different contexts, and most end users have a different context and have a different bar for what is appropriate. So with an eye towards that, our paper largely focused on documenting our data sets. We mapped out the profanity rate in each of the different data sets using an approach we took. We built topic models. We did some bias and sentiment like co-occurrence with gender and positive and negative language. But by and large, we didn't use that to rule in or rule out data sets. And the primary reason for this was that we don't know. First of all, I mean, like we as a community do not know what a good bar is for judging these things, but we don't know what people are going to use these models for. And to a large extent, we can't know what people are going to use these models for because we just publish the weights online and anyone can download it off Hugging Face and fine tune it on their own. And I mean, this sort of sounds like a diffusion of responsibility because I'm saying, it's really on the applications. And I think it is on the researchers to collect and provide the data that it should be used to draw conclusions about whether or not a particular language model or whether or not a particular data set is appropriate to a context. But to a large extent, I think it's on the people who actually put these models into production, who build products around them, who build them into things in the world, to really take a critical look at the different options available to them and decide what is or is not appropriate to what they want to be doing.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Stella just very elegantly explained about how it's important to understand, the context in which a certain tool will be used. But as Stella said, I'm going to risk it and going to jump on that landmine there and say, whose morals? What does this even mean? What's this question? So this is a question I think about quite a lot. And I think it is a question that I think more people should take at face value and kind of think, well, what does this mean? What is it? A question I like to ask AI researchers to annoy them is ask them, what happens if you succeed? What happens if just everything works exactly as planned? You build superhuman intelligence. It's 1 billion times smarter than humans. It can solve all the problems. It can do all the tasks. It does everything. It can learn and do anything. What then? What would you actually want such a thing to do? So there's at least two parts of this problem. On the one hand, you have this problem of, what kind of system of normative ethics or, decision making should such a system follow? Is there even a correct answer to this question? So this gets into like these really gnarly questions of, moral realism, anti-realism, subjectivism, contractionaryism, or whatever. It's this question of, is there some kind of objective ordering of normative preferences in some sense? If we imagine normative ethics as some kind of ordering of preferences over world states or something, like our ethics thinks world states with lots of dead puppies is bad and world states with lots of happy puppies is good. That's a decision. You need an algorithm that somehow decides that this ordering isn't that order, not the other way around. There's no reason you couldn't build an AI system that just has the sign reversed and thinks that dead puppies is the best thing ever, and it's going to optimize for that exact function. It's just a machine. It's just an algorithm that's being executed. It's a very sophisticated algorithm, perhaps, but it is an algorithm. In many sense, I personally believe that the task of writing down some ultimate theory of ethics as humans is probably impossible to some certain degree. But as Nick Bostrom very elegantly said, AGI and alignment is philosophy on a deadline. someone is going to build these systems and they will have some form of ethics. They will make normative decisions. They will make decisions about actions to take in world states to prefer over other world states. And what those, it doesn't matter what we do, we can do no research into this whatsoever. We could just build a system that has, just random values. And if we do that, I don't think the results are likely to be good. So in a sense, we have on the one hand this problem of finding, what is the correct thing to do? Some called outer alignment. Like, okay, what is the correct function to optimize for, thing to follow? I personally have an unusually high amount of hope that something at least acceptably good is possible here. This is related to the philosophical idea of reflective equilibrium, which is still, very complicated and unsure if this is possible. It's kind of this idea is that if we could just somehow get all, people to think extremely hard for an extremely long time about what the right thing to do is, we give them all the information in the world, all the processing power in the world, the time in the world. Would this converge into some maybe subspace of all possible ethics? If we imagine all possible ethics, is there some kind of basin of attraction of not terrible morals? Or is it the case that maybe if you just very slightly change the initial conditions, you veer off and have completely different ethics? I think there is a really real question about these, how would you extrapolate, human volition into these new scenarios? How would you apply moral, normative ethics to scenarios we have maybe never encountered, maybe that we cannot even understand? These are very, very hard and very real research questions. And I would say, oh God, I don't even know where to start with this. It seems impossible. But again, it's philosophy on a deadline. If we don't solve it, then we don't solve it, and then that's it. And to make things much worse, even if somehow we could find at least a direction of better ethics, okay, if you go in this direction, things are less bad or something. Even if that was possible, which may well not be the case, maybe different human ethical systems are so different that there's there's no way to get them to work together. I don't know that. Even then, we have this very hard problem of alignment. Is that how do we get a system to actually do that? How would we define, how would we write code, or that can capture these extremely complicated moral ethical structures and then implement them in a faithful way without veering off topic or tricking us or doing something that we did not expect the system to do? It's also sometimes called the inner alignment problem. So we have at least these two extremely hard questions that I don't know if we can solve them or not. I think I'm pretty optimistic that we can make progress on these problems at least. And in a way, I guess it's worth a shot, right? These systems will be built. They will optimize for something. I don't know how to save the world, but damn it, I think we should try.
I like that optimism. And I know, Soraj, I think you wanted to add to that.
A little bit. I agree mostly with what Connor has said. And I've been thinking about the problem of multiple ethical systems also. I think we can start small and start from what we experience, and such as the notion of a good person. And I think in the end, the major ethical theories, they have more similarities than differences, at least when it comes to the normal, ordinary normative judgments, such as what makes a good person. A good person does not lie, does not cheat, does not harm others. And all these very basic traits are shared by all the ethical systems. So we can start from that and focus on the similarities. There are fine points of disagreements, mostly about theories, because Buddhists have talks about compassion. Christians have other talks, and secular ethicists have, like the Kantians have their own ways of talking. But in the end, they share that, a good person does not lie, and, honesty is a very good trait to have, including the algorithm. So an algorithm has to be honest in its own way, like, it has to be straight. I mean, be able to function the way it's designed to do. It does not fail too easily, that kind of thing. So we can focus first on the similarities, and in the end, having said that, I would like to add that it does not matter too much which ethical system, which ethical theory as they exist now, like Buddhist or the Western theory, is in place, because in the end, they largely, I might be too optimistic. In the end, the end result would be largely the same as I have just said. So a group of AI researchers in Thailand, for example, might operate under the vocabulary of Buddhist ethics, and they come up with some kind of algorithm. The same researchers in, for example, India, operating under like Hindu system of ethics, come up with another algorithm, but in the end, they should work, because in the end, we all share the same planet together. So the fact that we are talking with one another here, is past midnight here already in Bangkok. So it's an illustration of the fact that the world is shrinking, and it does not mean that one ethical system dominates. It means rather, in my view, that any system, any effective system is already okay, as long as it can produce the end product that everybody agrees on. Basically, there are, of course, disagreements, and we can iron out those disagreements through negotiations, discussions, and so on. Yeah,
I really like that. I think that's such a optimistic and positive and conciliatory,
I think we need to, but
approach. Definitely.
I would actually make a even stronger claim, which is that, like, even independent of whether or not different ethical systems kind of operationalize in analogous ways, I feel like, so we've talked a lot about how companies and perverse incentives control a lot of AI research right now. I think that if there was a ethical system that, say, 500 million people somewhere in the world agreed was worthwhile, and you could build an AI that followed that ethical system, that would probably be better than like some unguided, randomly developed by companies type thing. Even if all of the different ethical guidelines and ideas don't go to the same place, I feel like they all go to a better place than kind of the direction that the world is headed right now, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think, Alexa, I think you probably would have quite a bit to say there, given your background and experience.
Yeah, this is such an interesting conversation. I really appreciate that we're landing on the ethical plurality does not mean is different than saying a kind of ethical relativism. So so this seems like a really great place to start. I think that what I'm thinking this great quote that says, anthropology is philosophy with the people in. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, how much do we need to be talking about ethics, sort of encoded ethics, and how much do we need to be talking about political and economic systems? And what does it mean to encode ethics, even potentially quite good ethical principles, if we don't attend to the ways in which these systems work in the world? So I guess, again, that I would like to bring our attention to thinking about impacts of these systems as being a key consideration. Now, I feel like this is why sometimes like ethics can be a tricky word. So like often I'd like to say like ethics and impacts. So and what is the relationship between ethical principles and actual social impacts? And that would be an open question to people on the panel.
Would someone want to jump in? Well, on that, no takers yet. I see there's as we sort of gather our thoughts there, I'd just like to, I'm sorry, I'm just reading. There's so many messages in the chat. I think I'm gonna, it's just almost impossible to keep up. So what I'd like to do, I guess, in the meantime, as everybody sort of catches up on the chat messages, is take a look at the questions that have been posted in Slido. So we've gotten a few questions there, and for those who haven't had a chance yet, I think Connor had shared the link to that. So please go in and input your question there. I think Andrew had posted a question there, which I think we've sort of addressed already in terms of how we can approach aligning these system goals with human goals, given that there is a total lack of alignment in human system goals. And I think thinking about plurality, thinking about participatory methods, I think sort of addresses that a little bit. I would say, unless anyone wants to add in, any of the panelists want to add in something there. Yeah, I think they're nodding in agreement. So, so one of the other questions that's on here is there's and this is I think it breaks away a little bit and brings us back to the corporate aspect of things. So it says some market research that Tristan contributed to found that industry isn't interested in AI ethics unless it's a regulation or compliance matter. So how do we get them to care? Anyone wants to take a stab at it? Yeah.
Just to spice up discussion a little bit, I might want to suggest a bit of a different possible view. This is the view I personally kind of look at this thing. First of all, I do think it's important for people to think about these kind of issues, but I think there is a real sense in how research and technology in itself, just by its mere existence, can have very powerful effects in changing the Overton window and like what is acceptable for corporations to do. I think one of the most important things to understand about corporations is that they are amoral. They are not immoral, they're amoral. They are incentive executors. You create an incentive system made of laws and norms and similar systems, and the corporation will execute its profit maximizing actions within that system. So for my personal hope of how we can improve the state of ethical AI is that if we develop better tools for building safer, more ethical AI, if, for example, we just develop very, very good techniques for detecting bias or for, analyzing or detecting problems before they happen, every corporation will be incentivized to use those tools because their customers would be unhappy if they don't use these tools. If it's a low enough cost, basically, if we lower the cost of taking ethical actions, we can rely on the market to sell us ethics, to do ethical actions for us. This is my biggest hope. It's like, to me, it feels like that the market system that we have in our world is one of the most powerful optimizing forces that have ever existed on the planet. And just putting yourself heads way in front of it is dangerous and difficult. It's not impossible. It can be done. But you're fighting the dragon where it's the strongest. A much better idea would be if you can find a way to align that, if we can make it in such a way that corporations make more money by being aligned. That, I think, is the way to go.
I have a question about that. So how would we think about something like a system that harms a very small percentage of people in a society, but benefits a larger group? So how would we deal with a situation like that?
That's a very large problem. That is one of the fundamental implementation difficulties with the concept of market economy, is that in a way we created a powerful optimizing system to optimize, a certain value, and this value is something of a proxy for human life. Like people with more money usually are doing better, and people with less money usually do not so well. But it's far from perfect. It is a very, very flawed system, and I don't know if we have a system that can like replace it or anything like that. In many ways, I guess that's where government comes in. That's why we have laws against abuse of minorities. That's why we have human rights. That's why we have these kind of things. I don't have a solution to these things. I'm just a humble scientist. If I could, maybe if I had the power to rewrite, all laws, maybe I could come up with something. But in many ways, I'm looking for a leverage point where my work can hopefully help the world. And I don't know. I feel like maybe I am also a bit naive in this sense, but I feel like most people want people to be happy. I feel like most people want the world to be a better place somewhere down the line. But there's so many things that get in the way. I think there are people that want the world to be bad. There are people that want to hurt other people. These people do exist, but I truly think they are rare. I truly think there are very few people that are like this. I think that the most people are incentive executors. They just do what gives them the most stuff. And they can be, pointed either direction and they don't really care. And if we give them the option, like if I give someone, I would imagine if I give someone even like a super rich billionaire oil tycoon 2 buttons, and the one button gives them $1 million and makes one person really happy, and the other button gives them $1 million and makes one person really sad, I would expect him to take the one that makes the one person happy, even if he doesn't know who exactly that person is. Maybe that's naive, but I feel, at least from my personal work, this is it is a hopeful point of leverage.
Yeah, I mean, none of us know all this stuff. That's why we have to think together across our disciplines.
On a kind of practical note, like in the United States, the current answer to your question about how do we ensure that the majority doesn't do things that are beneficial when it hurts a small number of people is generally the concept of protected classes. There's a lot of extra laws and regulations and policies that American companies, individuals have to follow with regard to specific classes of people that have been identified as important. I mean, I'm certainly not going to say it's the best system or that the current set of classes. So, they're kind of your standard education, religion, income, nation of origin. You're not allowed to, broadly speaking, discriminate against people or harm people because of their whatever like value they have for that. So I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I mean that's more or less the answer in the United States, at least. That is how we try to address that problem.
Right. And I guess sort of building on that, but maybe a little bit moving towards a different direction for everyone, and perhaps Stella, if you want to start with this. There's a question on what is the current trajectory, the worst case, and what should it be? So, what would be the best case for AI ethics, given the state of things today? And this was something that all of you had touched on earlier, keeping in mind the funding by big tech and academia. And I think, if I'm thinking back to this, there was a paper that was published, I think it was called the Big Hoodie Project, I think, or a similar title, if I'm not getting it completely right, that talked about this sort of nexus of, if I may use that word, nexus of funding in terms of how funding is funneled and how different research agendas are supported. So yeah, I guess the question is, what is the current trajectory and what should it be for AI and ethics, given the state of things?
So, I mean, so you had mentioned like worst case, best case. I mean, I think the worst case scenario for the future of AI technology is that somebody accidentally makes everyone die. We have all sorts of movies, we have all sorts of ideas about how AI could cause global catastrophes that would more or less cause human extinction. And I don't think that that's, I mean, that is the worst case scenario in my mind. And it's kind of hard to imagine something that would be worse than that. And unfortunately, I do think that that is not unlikely. Like it is sufficiently likely that it is something that should be seriously considered as a possible future eventuality. And it could be accidental, you know, it could be that some algorithm goes off the rails and does something horrible because there wasn't enough oversight, because people weren't thinking about what they were doing too much. It could be deliberate. It could be that, you know, some terrorist or some person who's just, you know, doesn't like other humans maliciously creates something that goes on a rampage and kills 3 billion people. Like, I feel like the accidental case is probably more likely, if only because there's a lot more people who could accidentally end the world than would deliberately do so, which is kind of what Connor was touching on. But I mean, I think that one thing that needs to be very present and that we need to grasp with is in these conversations, the worst case scenario for the current trajectory is that there are no humans in, say, 200 years. Like that is very on the table.
Right. Well, so that's the worst case, right? And given that it's super late in India, where I am at right now, and for Soraj in Thailand as well, given that it's super late, maybe if we take a more positive note, I'll throw this out to Alexa, given that you know, you think about art-based methods as a way of evaluating societal impacts. What do you think could be like the best case scenario for where we could end up? You know, given the current state of things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the things that I worry about are much more slow structural problems, like good people working in bad systems. So I think that if we turn our attention to the systems, that we could end up in really interesting and wonderful places. So like one thing I'm really interested in is seeing how communities and groups identify themselves the harms of AI, and how they imagine otherwise futures. So I think that we get really stuck in like one way of imagining the world, or these apocalyptic visions, but I think there's actually many visions of the future, and maybe tapping into this more pluralistic vision of the future and opening up this visioning process to more people could inspire us to think about really new ways that we can integrate technology into society.
So can you make that a little more specific? Like what would be an above average realistic scenario?
An above average.
Say, an above average. I'm not asking for the best case, but what's an above average case, say in 150 years, 100 years?
Yeah, I think that we can re-envision capitalism, and so that we are not building these technologies for profit, but that we're actually building them for communities and trying to meet the needs that communities have identified that they need met. I think that we have, you know, lots of challenges that AI ML systems could really help us with. And that we could apply all of this creative human genius to those.
Right. And sorry, Stella, you were gonna say.
I mean, I don't know. I was trying to. It's okay. I don't. It's fine.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you want to chime in after, I'll come back to you again. I wanted to continue building on what Alexa said and ask Soraj how you think, you know, because how do you think this manifests itself in the aspirations of the developing world, or do you even think if there are differences in how both these worst case and the best case scenarios are manifested in the hopes and aspirations of people in the developing world versus the developed world, or if there's a difference at all?
Yeah, thanks for all this. I've been thinking about the other industries. Perhaps we can learn from other industries like the pharmaceutical or automobile industry, and try to adapt those lessons to AI industry. We are talking about regulation, and we all know that cars today are much safer than cars like some decades ago. It's all because of laws and regulations, and people learn from road accidents and unsafe cars, and install all kinds of features that make cars today much safer to drive, including the airplanes. And when we come to the pharmaceuticals, they are, I think, one of the most heavily regulated industries there is, and it's all for the better, because we are talking about drugs and medicines and people's life. For AI, I don't know. I'm not a computer scientist, and I think we are. If we look back to history, there is a period when a new technology is developing, where people did not know much about the direction their new industry was leading. And after a while, things kind of settled down, and we can see that in the automobile industry and perhaps the pharmaceutical industry also. But I don't know, perhaps there is something fundamentally different with AI because it's autonomous, and there is a possibility that we could have an AGI in our hands, which is completely different from the automobiles or the medicines that we have been able to develop, and that is for the future. And I think that points to what we have said so far, and I would like to emphasize this again. The possibility of AI being a cognitive technology makes it all the more important for them, for the AI, if it's possible to become an AGI in the foreseeable future, to have a sense of ethics on its own, so that they know not only to calculate and whatnot, but to know what is right and wrong also. So the worst case, I think, apart from what Stella has said, the worst case, and I was reminded when I listened to Stella's talk, there used to be periods of AI winters, we all know that, where the previous generations of AI did not produce the result, and funding kind of became short for a few years, and then somebody came up with a new idea of AI research, and then things picked up again. I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know whether we will have an AI winter again in the next few years. I don't know. Or perhaps we have gone past that, and AI winters will be a thing of the past, cannot happen again. I don't know. AI winters would be one of the worst cases, and then discussions on AI ethics will die down also, because ethical discussions about ethics of a technology kind of going piggyback on the technology is talking about. So that could be one of the worst cases, and the best case if would be an ethical AI, AI with an ethical sense, and the technology that can produce what is needed, especially in the developing world, reducing poverty, inequalities, and so on. Yeah.
Right. And that's why at least on a lighter note, for my own job security, I would hope that there isn't another AI winter, and probably for some other folks listening in on the call as well. But no, I hear you on that. Sort of related to that, and this is perhaps the last question that we'll have a chance to discuss, was and it's kind of related to this notion as we're talking about AGI, and I know alignment is not all about AGI, but there was this interesting question in here that asked if there are any dissonances between AI ethics and AI alignment, and if so, what are they?
I would say that dissonance is more founder effects or culture than like fundamental differences. It's like how maybe someone who trained in a different set of tools or paradigms might have a different perspective on the same kind of field. So alignment, as the word is used, is kind of used to describe this very specific flavor of ethics research or safety research. I think maybe a better, I personally say like safety is like the broader term for like many of these more mainstream kind of AI ethics and stuff we see, but also alignment would describe itself as safety research. Alignment is just far more focused on long-term things. They take very seriously arguments of superhuman intelligence emerging soon and being very hard to align. These arguments are still not super popular in mainstream fields, which I find unfortunate, but I can understand the disagreement there. So I feel like most ethics kind of more describes kind of like the short term, kind of like the current technologies we see right now, the kind of societal struggles we see right now, and the possible misuse we can see. While alignment focus more on these long-termist perspective, what will happen when we have AGI that colonizes the universe? How can we stop AGI from liquefying the entire planet for resources to build its whatever the AI may want to build and such. So it's two different flavors, but I consider them to both be in a way trying to tackle the same problem.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you. I see that we're pulling up to the end of our time for the panel, and I know for all of you have to have taken 90 minutes out of your busy day, so I want to be mindful of that as well. I'd like to close with asking each of you to perhaps give maybe a quick 45 seconds to a minute long pitch, or what is it that you're working on, anything that you would like for the folks who are listening in to know about the work that you're doing, anything that they can help you with, or where to find you. The floor is yours. So I'll just go in sort of order that you're on my screen now. So we'll start with Alexa.
Yeah, so I'm working on a project that I would love help with if people have ideas for me, which is looking at how communities and groups around the world are resisting and refusing AI. The idea here is to think about how communities may identify harms in different ways than AI ethicists and practitioners do. So if you know of any interesting examples of people resisting AI, I would love to know about it. And then I'd also just like to pose a little provocation, which is that I think if we can imagine the apocalypse or the end of the world or AI taking over the universe, that we can also imagine equitable societies and different ways of living together. So let's sort of see what we can imagine for the future.
Very cool. Stella?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah. So I mean, Connor and I work closely together, so he's gonna cover some of the stuff. But one thing he's gonna cover, I guess, what our group is doing. But one thing that I've been looking at recently, more and more, is there's this very popular field in AI research called adversarial artificial intelligence, where people are developing ways that you can deliberately attack AI algorithms. This can include like photos that you modify so that a image recognition algorithm doesn't recognize it, for example, or a way to modify a sound recording so that an automated transcriber can't record it. One thing that I've been thinking about very seriously for the past year or so is, so generally speaking, adversarial examples are posed as bad things. They are problems with our AI technologies. They are ways that bad guys can stop our algorithms from doing good. But they're also the reverse of that. They are ways that good guys can stop our technologies from doing bad. And I'm really interested in questions about how you can attack artificial intelligences to mitigate or potentially ameliorate some of the problems that they cause. And this is something that I've been working on for a while, like I said, somewhat unsuccessfully, because the main limitation I've been coming up against is an inability to identify deployed AIs that I can have enough interaction with and recognize as bad. A lot of the AIs that I view as causing negative externalities in the world are not things I can like query arbitrarily often. So for example, there was a big hullabaloo last year because in the UK, they canceled like the A-level exams, I believe they're called. And they had an algorithm project what scores everyone would get on it. And just, they said, okay, colleges, pretend people got the scores that this AI algorithm predicted. I would love to be able to experiment with that and to try to take apart what makes it make decisions and come up with student profiles, for example, that will get certain scores automatically. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any access that I can read about in the news. Similarly with like police facial recognition, someone in the chat is correcting me. Apparently the A-level grading system wasn't an AI, it was an algorithm though, I think. Potential, I guess not an AI algorithm. So another example of this is like facial recognition. I think it would be really valuable if I could get access to, say, police predictive algorithms, from 10 cities, and try to develop masks or filters to put on photos that stop the algorithms from processing those images. Unfortunately, I can't exactly go up to police departments and get access to their algorithms. So if anyone is interested in stuff like this and has ideas about things I can actually like experiment on, I would be very interested in hearing about that and talking to you about how we can use that to do good in the world with adversarial attacks.
Very cool. Soraj?
Yes, two things I am working on. Firstly, I am collaborating with colleagues from Switzerland and Latin America and the Middle East. We are working on a project funded by the IDRC in Canada on feminist AI and inclusive AI. So the idea is to come up with a set of papers and pilot projects on how AI could be inclusive, so that it involves women, people of many ethnic groups, people in developing countries, how to make AI more accessible and more kind of equitable for everyone. That's the first thing. And the second thing I'm working on is I'm looking at the plethora of AI ethics guidelines. There are so many of them, and I'm trying to make sense of all those and look at the basic backgrounds, political backgrounds, or the meanings behind all those guidelines. So yeah, two things.
Very cool. Thank you. Connor?
So yeah, Stella's already said we do work closely together, but on slightly different things. So I guess my pitch would be for Eleuther generally, we're a nice community of open source hackers interested in AI and alignment, these kind of stuff. I particularly currently work on a project where we're interested in studying aligning, empirically aligning large language models to human values. So have humans interact with AI models, give them direct feedback, and use various techniques like reinforcement learning and such to see can we get the models to like learn like normative ideas, or at least, you know, be polite or something like that? And I'm more interested, I'm less expecting this to like work. I'm more interested in how does this fail? I'm very interested in, you know, how, like one of the things I want to do is I want to at some point open this to the public internet and see how people try to break it. You know, I want to see how would people try to troll my AI? What would that look like? How do these things fail? How can we think about better, more robust ways of these kind of things? If you're interested in working on this kind of stuff for me, drop by Eleuther, say hi. I try to always make time to talk to people, you know, with technical skills, interested in working with me. We're already quite a lot of people. It's already a bit of a management nightmare, but I'd be happy to talk.
Very cool. Maybe you'll invent an AI that helps with that. No, but I appreciate it. This has been fantastic. I feel like we've had sort of multiple discussions and panels happening with the chat, with our discussions, and some folks chiming in on Slido as well. So it's been, I felt I was just in absorption mode, just soaking everything up. And if I was a little bit unclear in some places, it's probably just the fact that it's late at night here, even later for Soraj, though he was a lot more articulate than I was. So, but I really appreciate you know, everybody, Alexa, Stella, Soraj, Connor, for all of you for making the time, especially also the participants who, you know, joined us, who listened in. And we're very, very active in the chat. So we also appreciate that, and on Slido. So thank you all for making the time. We have another event coming up in about 2 weeks that we're co-hosting with Salesforce that we'd love for all of you to come and join us and participate. I think Connor from my team has already dropped in details on how you can join that. We also publish a weekly newsletter. If you're not already subscribed to that, we'd encourage you to do so. We talk about the latest in research and reporting in the field of AI ethics there. Again, a huge thank you to the panelists, to my team for making this event possible. We hope you stay safe and healthy, get vaccinated, and hopefully we can all return back to normal life. And hopefully I'll get to see everybody in person sometime soon. Thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
this was great.
Bye.
Yeah,
chatting
this
with you
is
all.
amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying up so late.
Yeah.
Bye.
I go to bed right after this. Okay. Bye. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Good
Bye.
Bye.